Hello everyone. Today we will talk about Spring Security and JWT authentication. We will go through the main steps. We will create a project and configure it to work with JWT. But before we begin, I would like to say right away that this project is already partially assembled. It is not created from scratch. It lacks Spring Security and JWT. That is, right now, just like in a regular Spring application without security, there is access to the endpoints that I have. Accordingly, this is not a heavy Spring Security application. It is just a regular application that has a conditional registration, and we can add a user and view information about them. In other words, we have registration, we have profile viewing, meaning information about oneself, but there is no authorization and authentication. Accordingly, we will now add Spring Security and immediately add JWT. So let's get started with the setup of our project. First, we need to add all the necessary dependencies to our project. These dependencies include Spring Security and JWT tokens. Here are all the dependencies that we currently need. These dependencies are Spring Framework, Spring Boot Starter Security, JSON Web Token, in general, everything related to JWT tokens. We need all three of these dependencies to implement authentication using a JWT token. Great! Now let's get started with coding. Accordingly, we need to create a new package. We will name it Security. We have a great package available, and probably we could have started right away with the CustomUserDetails class. However, since we will need a JWT Filter and CustomUserDetails, here's a little spoiler. If you are already implementing and understand that you will be using JWT authentication, I suggest creating the JWT Service first, then the JWT Filter, and only then the Spring Config, since we need the JWT Filter and Spring Config. Let's get started. We need to create a Java class here. Let's call it JWT. Be sure to annotate the JWT service with the Act component annotation. Spring manages this class and creates instances within the Spring context, also necessary for the automatic creation of a bean. We write private string JWT secret value and place the JWT secret here. You can generate the JWT secret on the website, the link to which I have provided in the description, or just Google for a JWT secret generator. Before we continue, we will need a detail. Let's create a new DTO. We'll call it JWT Authentication DTO. You'll find out why soon. By the way, IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate sometimes gives suggestions, and in this particular case, it suggests correctly. We need a private string token, and we need a private, no, that's incorrect, private string, and also incorrect refresh token. We add the @data annotation. I assume you already know about the @data annotation, and let's preemptively create a couple more DTOs that will actually be useful later, so we don't have to come back to this. Refresh token.dto private string refresh token. It suggests correctly here. The annotation is the same @data, and as far as I remember, we need one last DTO, which is usercredentials.dto. I wonder if it will suggest correctly. Basically, the process of obtaining a JWT token involves entering a username and password. The username is the login. In this case, we will write an email, also a string password. Here, there is also a data annotation. We won't need any more data annotations. Let's return to our class. I got a bit confused, and we need the value of Spring Framework bins factory annotation. Now we proceed to create methods for generating tokens for Auth Factory, the refresh token. Now we move on to the full configuration of the JWT token public. What we wrote is JWT Authentication DTO. We will write generate, but we will write it differently. Not like this, generate auth token. It suggests correctly. Here, we are not placing a DTO because our DTO is the token and refresh token. Instead, we are placing a string, which in this case is an email, but in your case, it could be a username. We create an object, correct, set the token, and here we will set the login. We do not have a method for creating a JWT token yet. We will write and create it now. We will return a string bool, and it will be created from an ML JWT token. First, we need to determine how valid the JWT token will be. I will make it so that this JWT token will be valid for only 1 minute. On average, this can be done for an hour. Simply put, you will receive a JWT token and can use it peacefully for an hour. You can freely walk through the endpoints that are available to you for an entire hour. You won't need to obtain a new token since it will be valid. For example, in this specific case, I set it to 1 minute to show you how it will be refreshed, because you will also have a refresh token. We write date equals localDateTime.now plus, for example, minutes. If you want to add hours, then you can add hours, or for days, months, seconds, weeks, or years. Accordingly, I will set the minutes here. The minute will be 1. Add zone ID dot from system default to instant. Everything is prepared for us, up to the point when our JWT token will be valid. Now we return to jwts.johnwhattoken.builder.subject.email.expiration, meaning the expiration of the email subject. In other words, how long it will be valid date. And here we need the signing key. We need to sign the JWT token. Why is a signature needed? The signature ensures the integrity and authenticity of the JSON web token. We don't have this method, so we will define it and then create it. We are all set, so we need a key. We will have a secret key, massive bytes, key bytes, well, practically just massive bytes, key bytes, decoders, specifically decoders, base 60 for decode. And we place our JWT secret here, return, face, this method key bytes. That's it, we have a signature, we have JWT token generation. We also need to generate a refresh token. Here, let's set it to +1 day instead of plus. Or minus. This means the refresh token will be valid for 1 day. Since our JWT authentication DTO also stores the refresh token, we do gvt.dto.setRefreshToken and generate refresh token also by email. I created 2 different methods because our gvt.token for authentication is valid for 1 minute, but the refresh token will be valid for 1 day. Simply put, we will use it for 1 day. Done! We also need to create a method that checks the validity of the JWT token. But you might ask, how does this work if our JWT token for authentication becomes invalid? Simply put, when it expires, how will it be refreshed? Now we will write a method for that. We write public JWT authentication for refresh base token, placing the email and refresh token parameters. Everything happens the same way, except that our refresh token is no longer generated. It is set for us. Accordingly, the JWT token is simply updated. We have generate authentication token, which means that when both tokens are invalid, we enter the username and password, and we are issued a token and a refresh token, which are provided together. Accordingly, when the token becomes invalid, the refresh token will likely still be valid, and we can use the refresh token to update the token without needing to re-enter the username and password. We will also need to extract the email from the token. As you understand, the email is encrypted in the token, and we will need to retrieve it. You will see later where. Therefore, we will write this method in advance. Public string get email from token. String token equals gvts.parser.verify_getsync / build token. String payload equals token.getPayload. Return payload.getSubject. / this is how we will extract the email from the token. / we are not done with the JWT service yet, which is why I said it's better to start with it. It is one of the most loaded. Now let's write a method that will check if our JWT token is valid. Public boolean validate JWT token. / correctly using try catch. Try gvts.parser.verify token. // correctly build, return true, catch expired JWT exception E, // here we will catch which exceptions, // I almost forgot, we need a logger. Private static final logger equals logmanager.getLogger, JWT Service.class. Static.final.logger log. There might also be many catches and exceptions here. Also, a security exception and also through the logger, that's correct. And the last one is just an exception in case the token is invalid. If the token is invalid, it's valid. Great, excellent. So here we return false. So we are done with the JWT service. Now we need to create a record class CustomUserDetails. Here we place our user class. Here it is, the entity user, and we implement correctly user details from Spring Framework Security Core user details. We implement the methods correctly. Basically, we can implement everything calmly, but we only need these two. Here we write user.getPassword. Here we write user.getEmail. Well, accordingly, here we write username because it is still implied to be username, but for us, it is email. Again, I don't have any roles for authorities, so I don't have anything other than the password and login. We need this for the CustomUserService because we already have a user service. Here it is. Here we have get user by ID, by email, and add. Well, this is kind of like registration, right? Accordingly, custom security, custom. User details, CustomUserService, we created CustomUserService.impl, and we need to implement user details service from Spring Framework Security Core user details. Naturally, we are implementing the method here. And we also need to annotate it as a service and use required args constructor. This is necessary for us to correctly define everything in user repository. Now, user repository.findbyemail.username.map.orelseThrow. Let's do it like this, or else throw. Everything is correct. Just like that, everything is absolutely correct. Great, we have written the CustomUserService sample. I will make a few adjustments here. To be honest, I completely forgot about this. It's better to do it this way. Yes, here we'll create a JWT filter. Class JWT extends once request filter. We'll implement the method. In the request filter, we also implement the method. Here, we will need to add non-null. Great, we set up the component adaptation. Require args constructor private final JWT service, and also private final custom user service. Excellent. Let's write string token equals, and we will need one more method. Let's call it getToken. The rules for creating a custom recipe for the CustomUserService. String bearer token. Request.getHeaderAuthorizations is almost correct. String bearer token. Request.getHeaderHTTP headers. Authorization is correct. If the bearer token starts with bearer.ini.now, yes, that's correct. Return bearer.substring 7, that's correct. The idea sometimes gives very good hints, but not always accurately. For some reason, some methods may already be deprecated, and accordingly, you have to Google how to use them. For example, in older versions of the JWT token, things don't always work as expected. It may differ slightly, so be careful about which version you are using. There is a great method, yes, but I will add to it in service.validateToken.token. That's correct. We place the token here. If it is valid, then what do? Use the security context holder. Create a method. Set CustomUserDetails to SecurityConfig context holder token. It is void. It returns nothing. What context will we create? For the method, email. Naturally, it returns void, meaning it does not return anything string. By the way, this is where we will need this method that takes the email from the token. CustomUserDetails equals CustomUserService.loadByUsername, and we place the email here. CustomUserDetails equals CustomUserService.loadByUsername, and we place the email here. Just in case, let's go here and see that everything is indeed CustomUserDetails. That's correct. Not user details, but specifically CustomUserDetails. CustomUserDetails. Everything is accurate. Let's return to JWT Filter. And here, of course, the classes are generally named user, name, password. That's right. Thanks for the idea, you're giving hints. Custom. Oh, there was just a hint, I think. And the hint is correct. We will do it this way. And thus security context holder get context set authentication. Excellent. Security context holder get context set authentication. Excellent. So let's go back. Here the set has passed. Filter chain.doFilter.request response. The idea suggests correctly. And now, as I mentioned, we finally move on to SecurityConfig. We set it as a configuration. Enable web security and also enable method security. Here we need private final. No, not this one. Incorrect. Final JWT filter notation. Bin. Final JWT filter. Fabric, security, filter chain, HTTP, security, HTTP, throws exception, yes, that's correct. Import, HTTP, point, abstract HTTP, configure, let's do it, authorize. And now look for the abstract point, honor the abstract. Abstractly, let's do it. Disney ball, everything is correct. Before 1.5, Sochi before. HTTP request. Authorize. No, let's just write auth. Writing too much isn't great either. Auth. No, the request matches. And now I'm going to write it down. Yes, here it is. User registration. And we will also have another one like this. Not user, but it will be else. And like this. Permit all, which means to allow everyone, as well as request matches. This means that we will have open access for user registration and authorization, simply put. In other words, anyone will be able to register, and anyone can essentially log in. And for all the others, authentication will be required, specifically through JWT tokens, formulated right. Session creation policy, stateless, add filter before. We need the JWT filter, the policy states. This filter before. Here we need an animal filter just right. If we hadn't added it, I wouldn't have been able to add this line properly. Well, I could have added it, but why at the very beginning? Now we have almost everything written. We just have a little bit left to write, so I thought that it makes sense to write the return HTTP build in this order. Great, almost everything. We need to write one more. But this is more for security, because technically we can do without it. However, since we want to store encrypted passwords in the database, I assume we will need to add a method that will encrypt the passwords. Public password encoder get encoder. Let's write it like this. Get password encoder returns password decrypt password encoder, and we set for here. I think this will be the most optimal. So great. We have finished SecurityConfig, and we have just a little bit left here, just a tiny bit. Let's create a folder called ExceptionHandler in our codebase. We'll create a class named Global ExceptionHandler to manage errors effectively and ensure smooth execution. We add the controller advice annotation, and then we will write the handler. I assume we will then add the public. response entity, string, handle exception, circulate request annotations. Not quite like that. Yes, we basically don't need the request. We don't need the request. Great. Return response entity. Status.http status.forbidden body well. We will write fail. That's right. Plus, that's right. Ctrl-Alt-L. Super. Now let's add the annotations. ExceptionHandler, that's right. It's even simpler that way. And response status, just not unauthorized, but forbidden, great. Just not it, I try, but the form is great. Let's also write another one. I'll just copy it directly. Handle generic exception. Here we simply have an exception the status we have. Internal server error. Looking for status. Internal server error. CTP status internal server error. And of course, we have an error here. So we have an exception here. That seems to be it. At least the handler has been implemented for now. Now we just need to write the controller. What we need is for these endpoints. We create a controller and name it controller. We have require src constructor, REST controller, request mapping, private, final, UserService. And now we also need to specify JWT authentication.DTO in UserService sync in. It takes user credential.DTO as input. That's correct. And we also have the same thing to configure JWT authentication. Sting in, he takes himself in. User, when he was going until that, was alright. And we also have the same. Practically, we go to JWT authentication.DTO refresh token.token. Refresh token.DTO, and here we will implement a couple of adjustments. For example, here we will do it like this. User equals DTO. We will do it like this. User equals DTO. And accordingly, user set password can basically be done in the mapper, but I will do it in the service. The only thing I need to add here is, why do I have public final? Everything should be set to private. It seems strange somehow. Final, JWT Service, JWT Service, JWT Service, and also private final, password encoder. And here we use password encoder.encode and place user.getPassword here. That is, we take the password not from the DTO, but we simply take the user's own password and overwrite it, but in an encoded form. And we save the users. Great, we slightly modified the method so that the password is encrypted. Now we need to implement the method here. Before we write everything down, we need a couple more methods. Private user find by credentials, that's right. Let's call it optional user instead of optional user. If optional user is present, then user optional get. Otherwise user. But also we have if password encoder.matches user credential.getPassword, meaning we are comparing the passwords and specifically in this order. That is, if we go into matches, here we have the encoded password and the original password I.E. This is the password that we pass, and this is our encoded password. Accordingly, here we place the password that we entered I.E. We simply enter in the form, and here is the password that is already stored in the database. Accordingly, we match them, and if everything goes correctly, then we return the user. Great. Otherwise, we throw an exception. Throw new authentication exception. Email or password is not correct. So naturally, an exception is thrown, which is why we throw the method signature. Great, but we will also specify private here. I will add another method find by email, which will simply throw an exception and return the user, or else throw a role not found exception. In principle, yes, it can be done this way, or it can be done differently. User repository find by email. email, or else row. New exception, ring format, everything is correct, great. Now we are all set to write the service and then write the user controllers. User equals find by credentials, and we have these credentials. We return the JWT service, generate auth token, user, get email. The refresh token will be a bit different, string, and we return the service and not redkin. Refresh. The refresh token will be different. What does the string suggest? There's nothing extra. If our refresh token is not null and JWT service.validate JWT token is correct, then we have the refresh token. We have user equal to find by email JWT service.get email from token. The refresh token gives the JWT token correctly, and then we have the user with the refresh token. User equals find by mail, JWT service, get email from token, personally refresh token, and we return service.generate auth token, not auth token, but refresh token, refresh base token, and we place user.get email and refresh token here. Since in refresh base token we have a mail and refresh token placed, everything is correct. Only here we will not return null, but throw an exception throws new authentication.evaluate refresh token. Yes, everything is correct. So let's move on to writing the controller's public response entity JWT-application.to string and string username, string password, but not quite in user-credential.to user-credential.to request body. So here we will set our post mapping, that's right. And this results in syncin. Let's run all of this through StrikeEdge JWT. Authentication.DTO JWT. Authentication.DTO equals UserService.syncin userCredential.DTO. Of course, return.response.idt.ok. JWT. Authentication.DTO. But here we won't use throw new runtime exception. Instead, we will specifically write our own message authentication failed and message.getMessage. That's it. We have sync in this case. Great. Now we need to write another one, post mapping. So why do I have request here? I thought I inserted post mapping. Strange. Don't get it mixed up. Let's write the post mapping. The main thing is not to confuse it again. We'll write refresh here, but not quite like this. Public JWT authentication.DTO refresh. Yes, everything is correct here. Return UserService.refresh token. The refresh token.DTO throws an exception. Great. Alright, we are done. Now I'll show you how it works. Here is my postman. So let's sign up. We'll use gmail.com. I haven't set any checks on the password, on password complexity, or on the email, whether it's valid or invalid, so you can enter anything for now. I think you can configure this, I assume. Sending. We receive the user edit message. Let's go to the database and check. Yes, indeed, the password has been encrypted. Great. Now let's move on and get the token. Look. Here's what we're going to do. We want to receive something by email. Here we have it. And let's try to get it here. The email we have is, I think, test@gmail.com. That's correct. So, as known, we have authorization again, but we are not implementing it. 403, great. We are not allowed in. Awesome. But at the same time, we were allowed to register. We put the post back, go to authorization, copy it, and we also need to copy this. Great, we copied it. Now we enter the email rest@gmail.com and the password 12345. Please, we received the token and refresh token. Let's write the refresh token like this, for example, right here. We'll need it. And now let's copy the regular token and try it out. So this is our registration. Oh no, this is actually for obtaining it. And here we take the token, paste the token here, send it, please, and we receive all the information. Of course, everything can be customized. Now a minute will pass. Our token is valid for 1 minute, meaning it can work for 1 minute. Let's confirm this, please. We confirmed it. The token is no longer valid. There are, of course, a bunch of errors. Something popped up. Oh, right. Everything is correct. The JWT token is no longer relevant. Great, now we move on. We don't need to re-enter the data. Why? We are just refreshing. Why did I say to save this token? Because we'll need it. Go to post, go to refresh body row, refresh token, go here. Enter this one. So no. No. We will need to log in again and get both a token and a new refresh token here. And so we only get a regular new token so as not to say much. Otherwise it's valid for a minute now. I'll quickly write it here. Here it is updated. And everything works for us again. Everything is functioning properly once more. Tada! Write your suggestions on what you would like to see on the channel. Which technologies should we explore? Maybe we can go into more detail about something. The same Spring Security or JWT. I really hope this video helped you and that everything is working for you now. And you can continue writing your code, developing your project, your application. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to learn more details or if something didn't work for you for some reason, either rewatch the video more closely or write to us in the comments and we will try to help you in any case. This is important because depending on when you watch this video, some methods may have already been deprecated over time and you might not want to use them. Alternatively, you might be on the same version, but if there is a new version, you will likely be working with that. So if you have any questions, please write to us and we will do our best to assist you. Thank you all for your attention and goodbye.